My name is Olivia, but most people call me Liv. I've never been one to shy away from the truth, but lately I've been feeling like I've been holding back parts of myself. Parts that used to be mine, but now seem to belong to everyone else. Growing up, I thought I had it all, at least in the beginning. My mom, Sarah, was a single mother when I was born. I never knew my dad, and at first I never cared. I had her, and that was enough. She was my best friend, my rock. We'd spend weekends baking cookies together, taking long walks through the park, and curling up with movies in the evenings. It was just the two of us, and I never felt any need for more. I remember one summer night, we sat on the porch swing as fireflies danced around us, and she told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her. For years, that moment was my anchor. Then, when I was 12, everything changed. It wasn't that my mom wasn't happy with me or that I had done anything wrong. She was just lonely. And I get that now, more than I ever did back then. But at the time, I was crushed when she brought home a man who wasn't my dad. His name was Mark, and I'll never forget the day she introduced him to me. It was a Sunday, and we'd just gotten back from the farmer's market, our usual weekend outing. I had my arms full of fresh tomatoes, strawberries, and an overpriced bouquet of daisies when she opened the door to the house, and there he was, Mark. A stranger with a warm smile and an awkward handshake. I remember him standing there, his hand extended toward me, as if he expected me to accept it. His eyes were kind, but there was something about him that didn't sit right. I wanted to hug my mom and ask her what this was all about, but instead, I found myself just standing there, frozen, holding the bouquet like it was a shield. The worst part, she was so happy. She looked at me with those hopeful eyes, the same way she used to look when she asked if I liked the cookies or if I wanted to go for a walk. And I could see it. She was so excited about him. He made her happy, and I wasn't prepared for the way everything in my life was about to shift. We spent the next few months adjusting to him being around. And then came the real change, the one that took me from being Sarah's one and only to sharing her with someone I barely knew. I'd come home from school one afternoon to find out that not only was Mark still in our lives, but he had a daughter, Claire, who was moving in with us. A daughter my mom had never mentioned before. Claire was a year younger than me, and from the moment she walked through the door, I could tell she had that look, the one that says, "I belong here, and you don't." She was beautiful, with long golden hair and a smile that seemed to light up the entire room. My mom instantly doted on her, laughing at her jokes, taking her side in every argument, and brushing off my attempts to bond with her. At first, I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself Claire was just a new addition to our family, and I should be happy for my mom. But when I went to bed that night, after yet another dinner where Claire's jokes and laughter drowned out mine, I cried for the first time in years. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't just being jealous. I wasn't just being a typical teenager who didn't want to share her mom. Something deeper was happening here. My mom was choosing Claire over me, and I couldn't understand why. I never asked for much from her. I never needed her to choose me over anyone else. But suddenly, it felt like she wasn't even trying to balance her love for me with her love for Claire. It felt like I was being pushed out. Over the next couple of years, things only got worse. Mark and my mom got closer, and I began to feel like an outsider in my own home. They went on weekend trips together, bought furniture for the house without consulting me, and celebrated holidays with Claire's family, making me feel like a guest in my own life. But the worst part? My mom started treating Claire like her real daughter. She'd whisper to her before bed, share inside jokes, and go out of her way to make sure Claire felt special. I don't even think my mom realized it, but it was happening. I was becoming invisible, and Claire was taking my place. I tried talking to my mom about it once. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hand shaking as I asked, "Why do you spend so much time with Claire? What about me?" I had tears in my eyes as I spoke, feeling the weight of everything I had been holding in for months. My mom looked at me, her face softening, and said, "You're my daughter, Liv. I love you, but Claire needs me more right now. She's been through a lot, and she's adjusting to living here. You're older, and I know you can take care of yourself." But I didn't want her love because I could take care of myself. I wanted her love because I needed it, because I had always been the one who needed her, and now she was offering it to someone else. I didn't understand why Claire's needs suddenly mattered more than mine. As time passed, I started noticing the subtle ways Claire got special treatment. She was the one my mom took shopping for new clothes, while I was expected to make do with what I had. When we went out for dinner, Claire always got to pick the restaurant, and my mom never questioned it. The smallest things, like Claire getting more compliments, more attention, more love, began to feel like a punch to the gut. Then came the day I realized I couldn't stay quiet anymore. It was my birthday. I had spent weeks planning a small party with just the two of us, me and my mom. I had even saved up my allowance for a few months to get her a gift I thought she'd love. I was excited, maybe too excited, but I felt like if we had just one day to ourselves, things might go back to how they used to be. But when the day finally arrived, things fell apart. My mom came home from work late, as usual. When I asked her what we were doing for dinner, she casually mentioned that she had made plans with Mark and Claire, plans she didn't tell me about until the last minute. I was devastated. I spent the night in my room, surrounded by the decorations I'd set up, alone. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when I felt like I was losing my mom to Claire. I had spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, trying to be everything she wanted me to be, but it was never enough. And when I confronted her about it, when I told her how I felt neglected and replaced, she looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "I'm sorry, Liv. I love you, but you need to understand that Claire needs me more right now." And that was it. I left that night. I didn't pack a bag or say goodbye. I just walked out the door and didn't look back. I told myself I wouldn't go back until my mom realized what she had done, that I wouldn't forgive her for pushing me aside for Claire. It wasn't fair, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it anymore. But little did I know, that was just the beginning of a much bigger conflict, one that would tear my family apart and force me to make decisions I never thought I'd have to make. The first few months after I left felt like a strange kind of freedom. I moved into a small apartment in the city using the savings I'd set aside for college. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get by, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to live up to anyone's expectations. I could breathe without feeling like I was being suffocated by the weight of my family's demands. But that sense of peace didn't last long. A few weeks after I moved out, I got a call from my mom. She sounded different, nervous, almost pleading. She told me she had something important to discuss and asked if we could meet up. Part of me hesitated. I didn't want to get pulled back into the same old drama, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. We met at a small cafe downtown. My mom looked older than I remembered, her face drawn with worry lines I hadn't noticed before. She apologized for everything that had happened between us, but there was an air of guilt in her voice that made me feel like she was only saying the words to placate me. "I know I hurt you, Liv," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. "But things have gotten really tight financially. Mark's business isn't doing well, and we're struggling to keep up with the bills." I nodded, not knowing what to say. My mom and Mark had always seemed to be doing fine, at least on the surface. Their house was still nice, and they always had the latest gadgets, but I had no idea how bad things had gotten behind closed doors. She continued, her voice softer now. "I know I haven't been there for you, but we need help. Mark's business is sinking, and we're on the verge of losing everything. I know it's asking a lot, but I need you to help us. We need the money." My heart sank. I had always been the one to support my mom emotionally, but this was something different. She was asking for money I didn't have much of myself. I had a job, but it was barely enough to cover rent and student loans. The last thing I could afford was to bail her out. But my mom's voice, so full of desperation, made it impossible for me to say no. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. "I'll help," I said quietly, already regretting it. In hindsight, I should have seen it coming. It wasn't the first time my family had tried to manipulate me into giving up what little I had. Once I agreed, it didn't stop there. The request came fast and furious. At first, it was just a few $100s here and there for emergencies, a car repair, a medical bill that didn't get covered by insurance. Each time I gave, I told myself it was just temporary, that they would pay me back, that things would get better soon, but they didn't. Every time I sent money, The excuses grew more elaborate, the stories more convincing. Before I knew it, I was draining my savings to cover their expenses, just to keep them afloat. I wasn't even sure if I was helping anymore, or if I was just being used as a financial lifeline. Every time I asked about the money, my mom would promise she'd pay me back as soon as things improved. But I knew better than to believe her. Then came the breaking point. I was on the phone with my mom one evening, going over a list of things she needed help with. Another loan payment, another utility bill, more repairs for the house. My stomach churned as I realized that I had been keeping them afloat for months now, and nothing had changed. Mark's business was still struggling. Claire was still getting everything she wanted, and I was still the one sacrificing to keep it all from falling apart. "That's the last I can do," I told her, my voice finally firm. "I can't keep giving you money. I'm barely making ends meet myself." She paused, and I could hear the faint rustling of papers on the other end of the line. "Liv, I understand, but please, just this one last time. Mark needs this to get the business back on track. You're the only one who can help us." My mind screamed no, but I felt the familiar tug of guilt. I had always been the one to fix things when they broke. I had always been the one to help, even when it meant putting myself last. It was hard to shake that sense of responsibility, even harder to say no. I thought about it for a moment, and then, against my better judgment, I caved. "I'll send it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. But this time, it was different. As soon as I transferred the money, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I knew, deep down, that I had made a mistake. I had just given them the last of my savings, the money I had set aside to get through the rest of the year. I was about to hit a wall financially, and I didn't know what I was going to do if I needed help. The moment I hit send, I felt a knot of dread coil in my chest. And sure enough, the next day, as if on cue, I got a message from my mom asking for even more. "Liv, I hate to ask, but can you help with another small expense? Mark's car broke down again." That was when I realized the truth. I wasn't helping. I was enabling. I was stuck in an endless cycle of giving, hoping that one day my mom would realize what was happening and appreciate me for the sacrifice I'd made. But deep down, I knew that day would never come. I had become their bank, a source of financial support, but not a daughter. Not a person they cared about, just someone to use when they needed something. The realization hit me harder than any of their requests ever had. I wasn't just being used, I was being manipulated. My mom had been manipulating me for years, even if she didn't realize it. Every time she cried to me about how hard things were, I fell for it. Every time Mark needed more money for his business, I gave. And every time Claire needed something, my mom made sure I was the one who footed the bill. I was a fool to think things would change. But I couldn't go on like this anymore. I had to stop letting them take everything from me, emotionally and financially. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to break free. I'd always known that my family had their flaws. I'd been the one to clean up their messes when things went wrong. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated: the sheer magnitude of betrayal that would hit me, coming from a place I least expected. It started innocently enough, or at least I thought so. I got a call one afternoon, the kind I'd been getting for months now, my mom on the line, sounding stressed, but this time with a hint of excitement in her voice. "Liv, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her tone almost giddy. "Mark got an investor interested in his business. It's a big deal. This could change everything for us." I held my breath. Every time my mom mentioned a big deal, I braced for disappointment. Mark's business had been on the brink of collapse for years, and every time they claimed it was on the up and up, it never lasted. But I wanted to believe this time would be different. I needed to believe it, for my own sanity. "That's great, Mom. I'm happy for you guys," I said, trying to keep the edge of doubt out of my voice. She didn't hear it, or at least she didn't want to. "There's just one catch, though," she continued. "The investor wants to see how committed we are to making it work. They want us to show we're all in. So, Mark and I were talking, and we've come to a decision. We're going to sell the house." I froze. The house wasn't just a building. It was their life, the place they'd raised us, the place I had grown up. It wasn't just an asset. It was the symbol of stability. They were talking about selling it, Sell the house? I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. But why? Isn't it yours? She sighed, a sharp breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Well, technically, yes. But with Mark's business needing so much money, we can't afford to keep it. The bills are stacking up, and we'll never be able to pay everything off without a major injection of cash. The investor's putting in a lot, but we need more. The house will give us what we need to get back on track. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt relief. Maybe this would finally be the fresh start they'd needed, the solution to all their financial woes. But another part of me, the part that had seen this kind of talk before, wasn't buying it. Okay, I said, more to myself than to her. I get it, but I'm just concerned. This seems pretty drastic. Oh, Liv, she interrupted, her voice almost patronizing. You don't need to worry about us. We've got it under control. I didn't know why, but something about the way she said it didn't sit right. It was too easy, too rehearsed. It wasn't until a week later that the real shock hit me. I was sitting at my desk when I got a message from Claire. I hadn't heard from her in months, not since the whole fallout at my wedding. I wasn't sure if I was ready to speak to her again, but curiosity got the best of me. The message was simple, almost too casual. Hey Liv, hope you're doing okay. I wanted to tell you something important. We've decided to sell the house. It's happening. Don't worry, everything's fine. I blinked at the message. Claire wasn't the type to be this blunt, and she'd always been the one to stay on the sidelines, letting Mom and Mark do the talking. I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to understand what she meant. Before I could reply, another message popped up. Oh, and by the way, Mom and Mark are planning on giving me a portion of the proceeds from the sale. It's only fair since I've been the one to keep things together all these years, right? My heart sank. It wasn't the fact that Claire was getting a share of the money that threw me. It was the cold, almost triumphant way she'd said it. She knew how much I had been sacrificing. She knew about the hundreds of dollars I had sent over the months, the hours I spent convincing myself that my family was just going through a rough patch. She knew I'd given up my own future to help them, and this message felt like a slap in the face. I typed out a quick reply, but my fingers froze before I could hit send. My thoughts were racing too fast. The betrayal wasn't just in Claire's message. It was in the entire situation, the way I'd been manipulated into supporting their lifestyle, their problems, their every whim. And now they were cutting me out, giving everything to Claire, the golden child, as if I didn't matter. I sent a message back, keeping my tone as neutral as I could. What do you mean by a portion? I thought the money from the house was going to pay off debts. Claire didn't respond immediately. When she did, it was a mere few words. Well, it's just how it is. Don't worry about it. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I knew what was happening. This wasn't just a financial decision. It was a calculated move to cement Claire's place as the favored one. She was getting the money because, as always, she was the one who was deserving. I had always been the one who gave, who sacrificed, who tried to make things work. And now, I was being shoved to the side. I put down my phone, my heart heavy. The sting of betrayal was worse than I could have imagined. I had always known that Claire would be treated differently, but this was beyond anything I had prepared for. This wasn't just about money. It was about loyalty, about the years I had spent giving everything to my family, only to be discarded when they no longer had use for me. I thought about calling Mom, demanding an explanation, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had already made her choice. Claire was her priority, Mark was her priority, and I was an afterthought. I spent the rest of the evening in a haze of anger and disbelief. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been used for far too long. And worse, I had let it happen. But not anymore. I was done. Done being the one who picked up the pieces. Done being the backup. Done being their ATM. And the moment I made that decision, everything changed. I knew the moment had come. The moment I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Couldn't keep being the family's safety net without expecting something in return. It had taken me days to work up the courage, but when I finally made the call, it felt like I was severing a limb. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter with every ring of the phone. Liv, sweetie, is everything okay? Mom's voice sounded distant, but with the forced warmth she always managed to pull off in these moments. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat. "About the house, and about everything else." I could almost hear her pause on the other end. She didn't speak right away, as if waiting for me to say something that would make everything normal again. But I wasn't going to back down, not this time. "You've been avoiding the truth for a long time," I continued, keeping my tone even. "You and Mark both. It's become impossible to ignore. I've been helping you for years, financially, emotionally, practically. But now with the house, with everything that's happening, I realize it's been one-sided." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "Liv, what are you talking about? We've always been there for you. This is just a temporary setback, and we're doing our best to get back on track. The sale of the house will change everything, you'll see. Mark and we've worked so hard." I couldn't believe the way she deflected, how she minimized my concerns. It was as if she didn't even hear me. "You and Mark have worked so hard? Really?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "It's always been about you two, hasn't it? Claire gets everything, the golden child. And me, I'm just the one who cleans up your messes, pays your bills, fixes everything that breaks. And now you're giving Claire a chunk of the house proceeds while I get nothing. Not even a thanks for the years I've supported you." Mom's voice faltered for the first time, but only for a moment. "Liv, please don't say that. You know we're doing this because we're trying to secure the future. We'll pay you back, I promise." "You don't get it," I said, feeling the anger bubble up. "It's not about the money. It's about how you've used me. How you've always expected me to just give and give and give. I'm not your ATM anymore, and I'm not your punching bag." There was a sharp intake of breath. I could hear the familiar defensiveness creeping into her tone. "Liv, you're overreacting. You're making something out of nothing. We're family. We've always been there for you when you needed us." "No, Mom," I shot back. "You've only been there when it suited you, when you needed someone to take the fall, to pick up the slack. But where have you been when I needed support? Where have you been when I've had to swallow my pride to keep the peace? I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done." The words felt like a weight lifted off my chest, but the silence that followed was suffocating. Mom didn't speak, not for a long time. And when she finally did, her voice was low, strained. "You can't be serious. You're going to turn your back on us, after everything we've been through." "Yes, I am," I said, my voice unwavering. "I've had enough. I've given everything, and I've been treated like an afterthought. It's over, Mom. I'm cutting ties, financially, emotionally, everything." Her words came faster now, a mix of desperation and anger. "Liv, don't do this. Please, this isn't you. You can't just walk away from your family like this. We need you." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "You don't need me, Mom. You need my money. You need my help. But you don't care about me, not truly. If you did, you wouldn't treat me like this." Her voice cracked. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? You're breaking my heart." I took a deep breath, feeling the sting of her words, but the pain was drowned by the clarity of my decision. "I'm doing this because I need to protect myself. I need to stop giving everything to people who don't appreciate me. I need to stop being your backup plan." I could hear her sniffling, trying to compose herself. "You'll regret this. You'll see. One day you'll wish you hadn't made this choice." "I'm not going to regret doing what's right for me," I said, my voice firm. "You've had your chance, Mom. I've tried to be there for you, but I'm done. I can't keep doing this." I didn't wait for her response. I ended the call before she could say anything more. But the moment I hung up, I felt sick. I thought cutting them off would feel like a release, like taking off a heavy coat I'd been wearing for years. Instead, it felt like I was shattering a part of myself, like I was betraying the little girl who had spent so much of her life trying to fix everything, to earn her family's love. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone, trying to convince myself that I had done the right thing. But then, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Mark. "Liv, what the hell is going on? Your mom just told me what you said. You can't just cut us off like this. You're being unreasonable. We've always been a family, and you're acting like we're nothing to you." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, a family who only calls when they need something. A family who takes, but never gives." I paused before I sent the next message. I didn't need to explain myself to him. He was just as much a part of the problem as anyone else. "I'm done, Mark. Don't bother trying to fix this. I'm cutting you all off. No more money, no more help, no more pretending." I hit send. Within seconds, my phone buzzed again. It was a flood of texts from both Mom and Mark. Then, Claire's name flashed across the screen. She was the last person I wanted to talk to. The message from Claire read, "Liv, what the hell are you doing? This is a huge mistake. You're hurting Mom and Mark. You're breaking everything apart. I'm not going to let you do this." I scoffed. "You've already broken everything apart, Claire. Don't pretend you care now." I was done. No more manipulation, no more guilt. I was cutting the financial umbilical cord, and with it, the emotional one. The family I had tried so hard to keep together was slipping away, but I wasn't the one tearing it apart. They had already done that piece by piece. I was simply taking my freedom back. And for the first time in my life, it felt like the weight had finally been lifted. I had no idea what would come next, but I knew I wouldn't go back. This time, there was no turning around. The weeks that followed were strange. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. There was a part of me that had always thought I'd feel guilty for cutting my family off. They had always played the card that family was everything, and that guilt trip had been ingrained in me for years. But when I walked away, it didn't feel like I had lost something. It felt like I had gained something. The weight I had been carrying was finally gone, and I could breathe again. I threw myself into my work with a focus I hadn't had in years. The life I had been putting on hold to support them was now mine to live. My job at the law firm had always been demanding, but now it felt like I had room to excel. I started taking on more responsibility, handling cases that were far more complex than anything I had done before. For the first time in a long time, I was challenged, and I was thriving. But it wasn't just work that changed. I had always loved cooking. It was a passion I never got to nurture because there was always something else demanding my time. My weekends used to be filled with running errands, meeting the needs of my parents, or taking care of tasks for Claire. But now, those weekends were mine. And instead of spending them in endless guilt or resentment, I started cooking again. Really cooking. I found myself experimenting with recipes, challenging my own culinary skills, and even hosting small dinner parties with friends I had neglected in the chaos of my family's needs. It wasn't long before one of my friends, Rachel, encouraged me to turn my passion for cooking into something more. "You're always posting your food on Instagram, Liv. People love it. You should start a food blog. I swear, you'd make a killing. You've got a knack for it." I had always dreamed of doing something like that, but it had always seemed impossible. Between work and my family's constant demands, I didn't think I had the time or energy. But with the weight of their expectations no longer hanging over me, I found myself thinking, why not? So, I started. It was slow at first, just a few recipes here and there. But soon, I found myself getting more followers, receiving messages from people who genuinely enjoyed my content. I got invited to food events, and companies began reaching out for partnerships. Before I knew it, my hobby was turning into a legitimate business. But the biggest shift came from within. I had always been so afraid of failure. For years, I had lived in the shadow of my family's expectations, afraid that if I took the wrong step, I would disappoint them, disappoint myself. But with the distance between me and them, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I had proven to myself that I could be successful on my own, without relying on anyone but myself. And when I got my first major sponsorship for my food blog, an offer that could easily double my monthly salary, I realized that I had done it. I had built something from nothing, and it was mine. No one could take that from me. I was finally free. Free to be myself, free to pursue my own dreams, and free to live a life that was for me. The real victory wasn't in the money or the success, though. It was in the peace I had found. The calm that came with knowing I didn't have to constantly prove my worth. The joy of spending time with people who truly valued me, my real friends, the ones who stuck around when things got tough, the ones who never treated me as a backup plan. I even started dating again, slowly at first. After years of being consumed by the drama of my family, I'd almost forgotten what it was like to just enjoy a relationship. But when Alex came into my life, I realized how much I had missed being me in a partnership, not the person who was constantly putting everyone else first. Alex was supportive, kind, and most importantly, he respected my boundaries. It wasn't the tumultuous, codependent relationships I had watched unfold in my family. It was healthy, it was real, and most importantly, it was mine. It wasn't just the career or the love life, it was everything. I started traveling more, something I had always wanted to do but could never afford, or felt guilty about spending the money. I went to Italy for a month, staying in a small villa in the Tuscan countryside, cooking fresh pasta every day, and learning from local chefs. It was a dream come true, one I would have never allowed myself to chase if I had still been tethered to my family's needs. And through all of it, I found something that had been missing for so long: myself. I wasn't just a daughter, a sister, or a backup plan. I was me. I was Liv, the woman who had spent years navigating a maze of expectations and obligations, and who had finally chosen to break free. But as much as I had found peace in my newfound independence, the ghosts of my past still lingered. My phone had stopped buzzing with texts from my family after I had cut them off. The silence was deafening at first, but I had come to accept it. I wasn't going to let their guilt or their manipulation pull me back into their web. They had their chance, and they squandered it. It wasn't until a year after I'd walked away that I received a message from Claire. The message was simple, just a few short sentences, but it hit me harder than I expected. Liv, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I was taking you for granted. I wish I could undo everything. It wasn't an apology from my parents, and it wasn't a change in the dynamics of our family, but it was something. For the first time, Claire was admitting she had been wrong. It was a small step, but it was something I had never expected to hear. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a moment to think about what it meant. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was progress. It was Claire taking responsibility for her part in the pain I had felt for years. And for me, that was enough. I had always thought that leaving my family would mean losing a part of myself, that cutting them off would leave a hole in my life that I couldn't fill. But instead, I found that the hole was never mine. It was theirs. And once I stepped out of the shadows, once I took control of my life, I realized that I didn't need them to feel whole. I had everything I needed within myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for validation from anyone but me. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and now, with every new milestone I reached, whether in my career, my personal growth, or my relationships, I was proving that I didn't need my family to succeed. I was thriving because I had learned to trust myself. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready